Welcome to Weird Web Radio, an explorer's guide to hidden worlds of the paranormal and occult, reality-expanding experiences, and the downright weird and bizarre. With your host, Lonnie Scott.
We are recording. Deborah Blake, welcome to Weird Web Radio. It is amazing to have you here.
Thank you very much. I'm so glad to be here.
Well, I'm glad you feel that way, because if you ever
so
pay attention to the show, I might ask you a question or two you don't want to answer, but we covered that, didn't we?
Yes, we did.
All right. So for everybody listening, real quickly, a little bit more about Deborah from the back of, I believe this is your latest book, right? The Everyday Witch's Coven. Okay, it's The Everyday Witch's Coven, Rituals and Magic for Two or More, published by Llewellyn Publications. Shout out to Marcus again for helping set up the interview. Says here, Deborah Blake is the best-selling author of more than a dozen books and tarot kits, including The Everyday Witchcraft, Everyday Witch A to Z, Everyday Witch Book of Rituals. We're noticing a pattern here. Everyday Witch Tarot. Everyday Witch Tarot is so mind-blowingly one of my favorites, and we'll get into that later. I have nearly worn out my first copy of it, in fact, and Marcus, if you're listening, I won't be mad if you send me another. So
if he doesn't, I will.
Yeah. And the Everyday Witch Oracle, which I also have. I'm before I go another minute into this thing, I just want to give a quick shout out to Elizabeth Alba, who is the illustrator of these decks. Elizabeth's art, I don't know what it is. I can't, like people say, you don't know art until you see it.
Yeah, she is amazing, and she is a dream to work with. She is absolutely a lovely human being. I'm not just saying that because I'm working on a deck with her at the moment, but no, I was so fortunate to be able to work with her on these decks. And we can talk about that way more because I am happy to sing her praises till the cows come home.
Oh, well, why not? Let's go ahead and do it. Let's do it now since we're on the subject.
Yeah, we don't need to talk about me anymore. Let's talk about Elizabeth.
Let's talk about Elizabeth. Hey, Elizabeth, I wish we could have had you on. So I know the first time I saw that deck, one of the first things that caught my attention was, I don't know how to describe her art in a way that, because it's not like it's realistic, like you see some tattoo artists and some cards that look more pop out like real, but it like feels to me
fairy tale realism.
Yes. I've told people, and I've commented to Elizabeth on different forums, and I hope she's seen them, that I feel like at any moment when I'm looking at her art and her cards, that those figures are either going to step right out of it and introduce themselves, or I'm going to be pulled into their world. It just does that kind of magical thing to me. And I'm such a huge fan.
They are so wonderful. I will tell you a story.
Please
How
do.
about that?
Yes.
I will tell you a Llewellyn story. So Llewellyn came to me a number of years ago and said, would you like to do a tarot for us? And my initial reaction, because I write fiction too, and I was in the middle of a fiction series and writing stuff for them. And my first thought was, oh, dear God, I'm so busy. And I had a day job at that point, running an artist cooperative shop and making jewelry to sell in the artist cooperative shop. And I sat with it for a couple of days. And then I went, are you kidding? You get your own tarot deck. Don't be an idiot. Say yes, which I did, needless to say. I mean, they asked me to do a tarot deck. Why it took me more than 27 seconds to say yes, I'm not sure. But anyway, they said, well, we have a number of artists that haven't worked with us yet, but we've had our eye on them. We're going to send you 4 names and links to their websites, and you tell us which one you think would resonate best with your writing. And I went to Elizabeth's website first, looked at her work, did not even bother to click on the other links, literally emailed Barbara Moore, who's in charge of the tarot department at Llewellyn and who does her own incredible tarot decks, and said, please give me Elizabeth. I don't care whose baby you have to sell. Seriously, I just want her. And thankfully, they asked her. She said yes, and the rest is history.
Yeah.
But the deck has been really successful. We're very pleased. It's been very well received. People love it. I get emails all the time. Elizabeth gets emails all the time about, people saying that they tried to connect with tarot for years and could never do it. And my writing and her pictures, her illustrations, this deck enabled them to take that next step, which, that makes me really happy, because one of the things that I kept in mind while I was doing it, and it's based on the basic Rider-Waite, Barbara, when she wrote back after I said yes, said, so are you familiar with the Rider-Waite deck and tarot? And I went, yeah, I've been reading professionally for like 25 years. So yes, that's what the deck I use. Now, of course, I use my own deck because otherwise people look at me funny. But I wanted to make it more accessible. That's the thing about my books. If you've read my books, you know that my whole goal is to make witchcraft in general accessible and friendly and, down to earth, so that people don't feel intimidated, that they feel like they're sitting across the dining room table from their friendly neighborhood high priestess and going, hey, I have a question about this. How does this work? And I just go, here's what it says in my book. But we wanted to take that approach with the deck, because one of the women in my coven had been saying to me for years that she had really wanted to learn how to read tarot, and she tried the Rider-Waite deck and she just couldn't connect with it. It didn't make sense to her. There's a lot of, esoteric symbols. There's stuff that doesn't really, for some people, it doesn't connect with their everyday life. And that's my whole shtick, is that, it should be part of your everyday life. And so when I sat down to write the book for the deck, and when I designed the deck, because I basically would write out what I wanted the card to look like, send it to Elizabeth, and she would make it look like that, only better. And I just thought about my friend who would be confused by things and say, okay, how can I make this less confusing? And apparently it worked. So yay us.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, right now we are working, because we have the Everyday Witch Tarot and the Everyday Witch Oracle. And right now we are working on the Witch's Familiar Oracle. And oh my God, we are having so much fun. This was actually her idea. I had an idea for a tarot deck that Llewellyn said no to.
Shame. Kickstarter.com. Yeah. Kickstarter.com. No.
Yeah, well, I wanted to do the Cranky Witch Tarot because I was feeling cranky. It was during COVID,
Oh, would you please? And team up with my friend Charlie Rainbow Wolf. She writes for Llewellyn periodicals, lives in my area. We are very, very good friends, and she would totally be helpful on that one.
Oh, yeah. I'm not saying I'm a cranky witch, but yeah. So then Elizabeth said, "Well, I had this idea for an oracle. What about familiars?" And I was like, I'm not sure how I'd write the book for that. I don't know. We, flew it past Barbara. Everybody loved the idea, and Elizabeth said to me, "Would you be willing to let me just do the paintings without you telling me, how to do it? Just, you write the book and I'll read what you wrote, but I want to be able to be free to be creative with this." And I said, you go for it. You earned it. You did 2 super successful decks with me. And by that time, I completely trusted her instincts. And in fact, everything she's come up with has been amazing. And yes, every once in a while, I would say, oh, can we tweak this? Or I don't think that's magical looking enough. And she'd add some more sparkles. But, she really, this one's all on her. She came up with the idea. She has come up with the pictures. I just wrote the little book to go with it and look pretty. I just sit here and let her be the talented one.
And the nice thing too is that, for me anyway, as I tell people all the time, the tarot is my occult drug of choice. I spend an obscene amount of money on this stuff, and
crystals. You don't even want to see how many rocks I have in my house.
I'm so glad I don't have that addiction.
No, I'm a tourist, so I'm all about the rocks.
For me, no matter where I see Elizabeth's art at, even when it's just going to like her art page and maybe it wasn't even a project with you, I still feel like I'm in this consistent world. She's allowed us into a universe that only she has access to, and it's wonderful that way.
No, it's her vision is so beautiful. I just love the way she sees the world. It's just and she really is. She's that nice. She's that wonderful. I mean, not that I would say she was horrible if I, but I wouldn't necessarily like keep going on and on about it. But she really is. She's,
right.
When you look at her paintings and you think, oh my God, that's incredible. That's Elizabeth on the page. She has been such a joy to collaborate with. I mean, that was how we ended up doing the first Oracle, is a couple of years after the tarot deck, when it was, it was still doing pretty well. But we'd both been really busy in the interim. And, finally we said to each other, okay, we've both done other projects with other people. None of them were as fun as working together. What can we do? Let's find something we could do. So
that's great.
And also I should mention the cover of the Everyday Witches Coven, Rituals and Magic for Two or More. Also Elizabeth Alba.
To any fan, it's obvious.
Yeah. Well, and what's really funny about this is that, Llewellyn came to me and said, okay, let's talk about your cover. We really would love to have Elizabeth do and I said, she's out on maternity leave. She just had a baby. She's not doing any work. And they said, well, we're going to ask her anyway. She came off of maternity leave temporarily to do my freaking book cover and then went back on. So, that's my girl. Yeah, no, yeah. She's, and she has 2 young boys now. And, she's painting this Oracle while wrestling a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old. So, all kudos to her. I have 5 cats and I have a hard enough time getting anything done. So I don't have
I don't either. So I'm going to get around to the things I usually answer first with a guest, but since we're on the topic of tarot and I love tarot, one of the things that I do when I get a new tarot deck or I look to buy a new tarot deck is I look for my favorite cards first. Mine are the 2 of Swords, because I'm obsessed with the concept of crossroads. Although in the Everyday Witch Tarot, you kind of abandoned that concept. Mm-hmm. It's a really cool way you did it.
Well, we do have, I mean, we've got the Chariot. The Chariot's a crossroad things. We've got a few crossroad cards.
Yeah. And the 9 of Pentacles to me has always spoke to me like it is a depiction of the goddess Freya in Nordic myth, who I highly adore and honor. And for some reason, I always see her wink and smile in those cards. And if I don't see her wink and smile in that card, I don't want the deck.
Right. And does she wink and smile from our deck?
Absolutely. I have it. And the High Priestess and the Star. Those are my 4 that I really want to go to and see what they look like in a deck before I make my overall decision. Do you have anything like that you do before you purchase a tarot deck?
All right, I'm about to embarrass myself. So I have a whole bunch of Oracle decks, a bunch of different varieties of Oracle decks. My coven uses them in ritual. All the years that I have been reading tarot, before I had my own deck, which I use the Universal Rider-Waite, the highly colored, pretty one, and I own, I think, 4 other decks. I have Mickey Mueller's Magical Cats. I have Barbara Moore's Steampunk deck, because I was using that for research to get some ideas of how she liked things when I mean, I love tarot decks, but my crack is books. I have a ridiculous amount of, me too. I mean, witchcraft books, fiction, in fact, I've been weeding. It's very painful, but I have to make space, and trying to get rid of books is like, which child do I give up? The one I really love or the one that I mostly really love? Yeah, no, it's horrible. I do, however, have some favorite cards. I love the 10 of Pentacles. The 10 of Pentacles, it's that happily ever after card. And I want the happily ever after. That's, I would like to be able to give everybody I read for the card that goes, yes, and it's all going to be wonderful. I do love the High Priestess card. And I particularly love the High Priestess card in the Everyday Witchcraft, in the Everyday Witch deck.
Yes.
In fact, I had her make me a print because I needed to put it on my altar, just a smaller print. It was like some stuff I was working on, and I needed to channel my own inner High Priestess. And for a while, I had the card from the deck, and I'm like, no, I need to use the deck. I can't have the card there. So I had her make me a print so that I could put the print up there. Ironically, one of my favorite cards from our deck is a card you would never think of as being your favorite. It certainly is not my favorite from the Rider-Waite deck. Can you guess?
Well, when you say it like that, my mind went straight to the Tower or the 10 of Swords.
I absolutely loved the way we did the Tower card, because my take, when I read tarot, one of the first things I say to people, especially people who haven't had tarot readings, is, don't panic. If you have a card that looks, unpleasant or negative or disconcerting or whatever you want to look at it, remember that, most of the things are not literal. I mean, sometimes, yes, if you get the Tower, it does mean your world just came crashing down or is about to come crashing down. But, in ours, there's this smoking tower with stones all tumbled on the ground, and the witch with her wand behind her back, which is also smoking slightly, and her cat crouched under a bush hiding. And there's this little twinkle in her eye, and you think, did she blow up that tower herself so she could move on and do something better? And in fact, I've had those, the last couple of years had been that card, me blowing things up because they had to be and it's horrible and uncomfortable and I don't like it, but sometimes you need the Tower, sometimes you need the Death card so you can end one thing and start another thing. All the years that I've been reading professionally, there is, I think, literally only been one time when the Death card meant an actual literal death. And then it wasn't a surprise for the person I was reading for. It was, I think it was her father, and she knew he was dying. So it was like, oh yeah, that's that. But that's, I tell people, there's a good side to all of these cards that look like they're not great. So yeah, one of my favorite cards in this deck, because of the way, I told her, this is what I want, and she just drew it perfectly, is that Tower card, because sometimes you just got to blow shit up. Oops, I said shit. Is that bad?
That's fine. You can go the whole Carlin route on this show.
All right. Well, I probably won't, but this.
Yeah, we are rated E for enjoyable.
That's funny. That's the rating they give me.
Yeah. You talked about being like a book addict, I guess. Well, yeah, I have the same issue. If you look around our house, it's like books just make love to books and make love to books overnight. They're everywhere. Everywhere I have space has books.
I'm sorry. Every freaking room in my house has books in it. I mean, the kitchen has cookbooks. There's books.
All right. So let's talk about books. If, let's say, for instance, a witchcraft related book and a non-witchcraft related book in whatever genre you want.
Right.
Out of these two categories, what's a book that you wish people actually read more of or knew about that maybe you don't think they do?
Well, I wish they read more of all my books.
Right?
Nonfiction and fiction. Yes, go buy my books. That's a tricky one, because what's a good book for me isn't necessarily a good book for somebody else. And,
maybe you're the perfect Grand Poobah of books and you just don't know it's good for you.
I'm the perfect Grand Poobah of everything. I am the Grand Poobah of crazy cat ladies. That's what I'm the crazy great Grand Poobah of. I wish that not so much a specific book or even a specific author. What I wish is that people read more widely. That they didn't just pick one or two authors and go, oh, I like this person, or even one publisher. I mean, I love Llewellyn, and I'm going to say probably a good 70% of the pagan books that I own are Llewellyn, partially because they put out a lot more books than other people. I have Wiser books. I have some other, oh my God, I just got a sneak peek because, Judica Isles from Wiser wanted me to do a blurb for a new book they have coming out on Scott Cunningham, written by his sister.
I heard about that.
My God. All I'm going to say is wait until you see this book. I was crying by the introduction. I mean, he's somebody, when I was a newbie witch, we all started out somewhere. And the high priestess who, taught me, those were the first books I started with. I've moved past them, but I still use them as resources. I look up his stuff, when I'm doing my own books sometimes. And I think people have this tendency to sort of poo-poo him these days as not being, I don't know, deep enough, sophisticated. I mean, who knows what people are poo-pooing. That's why they call it poo-poo. But, when I read the introduction by Matt, I think is pronounced
Matt Oren.
Yeah. Who's wonderful. I mean, I got to blurb one of his books, and
Matt is a multiple guest on this show, friend of the show, an amazing, awesome human being.
He's great. I follow him all over the interwebs. He's really terrific, and I've been thrilled with his success. A little jealous, but mostly thrilled.
He's a tireless marketer.
Yeah,
Matt. I know is listening. So Matt, teach a marketing class some kind, would you?
Because I suck at it. This is my marketing. I basically put up cat pictures with my book and go, look, my cat likes it. Shouldn't you buy it? Yeah, no, I'm really, really bad at marketing. I came on a show and spent a half an hour talking about Elizabeth Alba. That's how good I am at marketing. I didn't even talk about me. It's fine. but yeah, when Matt was talking about the changes that Scott brought about in the witchcraft community and the accessibility, I mean, I guess on some level I knew that, but by the time I got in, because I was sort of a late bloomer, those changes had already happened. I didn't come in at a point where you could only be in a coven. There was no solitary, or there was no official solitary. It's first of all, the foreword that Matt did, spectacular, really great introduction. You could feel his heart in it. He's a great writer. He's a wonderful writer. Let's talk about Matt.
I think there's literally 3 or 4 episodes on here with Matt. Matt's had his time here, and he knows it's an open door.
That doesn't need me.
Covered. We love you, Matt, but it's not your turn.
Yeah, so I guess if I were going to say less than a specific book, but that I wish that people had more appreciation for some of the groundbreakers. One of my favorite books was Marianne Weinstein. Okay, now the name of the book is not going to come to me. Of course, it's on my shelf. But anyway, she was one of those people that wrote a book that changed my life as a young witch. Well, a middle-aged witch. Because when I read it, I looked at things differently. And those are the books that I love, is the ones that make you stop and think, hey, I hadn't thought about words of power. Wait, what? Yeah. So Practical Magic.
Yeah, I was just Googling her name to see what it might have been.
Practical Magic? No, it's
Ancient Modern Witch, maybe?
No, it's something magic, but not practical. It's damn it. In 2 seconds, I'm getting up and going to my bookshelf. It's literally one of my favorite witchcraft books, but I have brain fog and
positive magic, personal magic, positive magic.
All right. Practical Magic was like a whole different witchcraft book, and it wasn't nonfiction. It was good, but it was not. And it was a movie. People don't realize it was a book first. But yeah, so okay, there you go. I've completely screwed up that question. So sorry.
No, it's fine. I like the question to take whatever route it takes. It doesn't have to be specific to what I ask. So we've covered tarot quite a bit in books, and I want to circle back around to something that I always find fun, that I like, especially when I'm talking to other practitioners of magic versus paranormal investigators, because for some reason these worlds never seem to mix well, and it doesn't make sense to me, who is a living embodiment of the mix. So have you ever experienced a haunting or anything that you would consider classical paranormal phenomena of some sort?
I've talked to dead people. Did that count?
That counts. So tell us about it. How's that go down?
Well, thankfully, I am not one of those witches who talks to dead people a lot, for which I am grateful, because frankly, I have a hard enough time dealing with live people. I do every once in a while get a sense for something, but I was doing a series of tarot readings. I had a woman who had lost, older woman, but she had lost her sister in a car accident unexpectedly. She was having a hard time coping. And she came to me over the course of about 6 months, a number of times, to just try and come to grips with this. And from the very first session, basically I channeled her sister, which was not a thing that I had done before. And I'm like, okay, I'm getting like this phrase in my head, does this mean anything to you? And she went, oh, that's my sister. I'm like, oh, goody. Okay. And so, there was that. And I didn't see the sister, but it was just like stuff popped into my head and I knew what it was and I shared it. And eventually, after about 6 months, the woman got what she needed and she got closure. And the sister said, I'm not coming anymore. And that was it. They were done. And I also do energy healing work. I call it intuitive energy healing because it was a gift that just came to me. It's like Reiki basically, but instead of taking a bunch of classes, I just went, oh, look what I can do. This is cool. And, one of my regular clients lost somebody very close to her and he came through when I was working on her on the table. But my most fun one, and it, again, doesn't happen very often, but I had a guy that I hung out with for a while. I think we tried dating. We ended up just being friends. And he happened to be the caretaker of the local Mason Lodge, which in my town is this gigantic old 3-story, Gothic building, which, he brought me inside and showed me around wood carvings, all of this stuff. He actually showed me the top secret upstairs spot, which I'm not sure he was supposed to. And I'm not naming any names. I don't want to get him in trouble. But the first time I went in there, we're walking around downstairs and we went to walk up to the second floor. And there's this big, impressive staircase that, went off to the side. And we're walking up the staircase and I stopped and I said to him, do you know anything about a woman named Grace? And he said, no, why? And I said, because she's on the landing. And I could see her. I mean, she was sort of faded. And this was one of the few times I've actually seen somebody.
So, physically see her the way you physically can kind of see me. Okay.
Yeah, she was clearly a maid of some kind. She was sort of faded. There was just that sort of, she had, an apron, some sort of little hat thing on. And she was stuck on this landing, neither going up nor coming down. I mean, I think she had been coming down and she wasn't, she was an echo, she wasn't one of the conscious, she didn't interact at all. thank you very much, Grace. But I was like, dude, yeah, she's like right there. And I'm like, how do you not see her? And he was actually intrigued by that stuff. He was very open-minded and he liked the fact that I was a witch. He was not a witch himself, but it didn't bother him at all. And he asked me lots of questions, and he was basically a curious explorer. So he just thought it was very cool that this woman, Grace, was there. And, the few times I went back to the house, she was right there on the landing. So, yeah, I absolutely am a believer, in all of that kind of stuff. Also very, very grateful that as far as I can tell, the 130-year-old house I live in, nobody died here. Or if they did, they were okay with it. So...
Yeah. Yeah, and maybe the vibes are just right. One of my running theories that I really adhere to on this kind of stuff is that it's not necessary for someone to have died anywhere for a haunting sort of activity to happen. I think just the vibe of a place reflects possibly what's going on the other side, and maybe your home just looks safe, secure, and wonderful place to chill. And
people
you get
come into my house and they all go, the property has great energy. The house, I've been here for 21 years. We've had a lot of ritual here. Of course, the first thing I did literally before I moved to stick of furniture in, did major cleansing, that kind of thing. Also painted the walls, which had been Pepto-Bismol pink. Not my color. Yeah, I swear that's why I got the house relatively inexpensively, because every man who walked in just went, and ran away and didn't go, oh, I could just repaint that. It'd be okay. And all the women looked at the completely non-existent kitchen and went, and ran away. I just built a new kitchen. It was all right.
There you go.
But I do think the energy here is not conducive to negative anything. Good. So... cause is me.
Cause is me. I like it. So let's see. I do want to get into Covens because that is the topic of your latest book. What made you want to write a book about Covens to begin with?
Well, technically, this is my second book about Covens. Okay. So my first book with Llewellyn, which I wrote in 2005 and which came out in 2007, and which is actually about to be re-released by Crossed Crow Books. Very excited about that.
Oh, very cool.
It was out of print with Llewellyn, and they, Crossed Crow Books said, hey, what do you think about us doing this? And I had actually just written a foreword for somebody else's book for them, and I was, impressed with the way they handled themselves, and I went, oh, that would be great. But yeah, so the first book that I ever wrote as a newbie witch writer was Circle, Coven, and Grove, A Year of Magical Practice. And I had done, 6 years or so with the coven that I was, taught in, and, left that, having done my high priestess, I'm ready to do this, but I then waited 9 months until, the gods went now. And started, my little coven, Blue Moon Circle, which still exists to this day, which, if you know anything about covens, a coven that's together after almost 20 years is an unusual thing.
Now, you all still like the OG members?
Yeah. We've had other people come and go. The 3 core members who started it, and one, friend who wasn't sure she was a witch and came from the beginning and now is in that honest to goodness part of, all still together. We've been at weddings, I helped one member give birth to her 2 children. We're family. It's just, I feel very fortunate. But anyway, so, I started my own coven, and I'm like, well, what the heck am I doing? And I read, the few books that were out at the time, but what I really wanted was a book that had everything I needed for that first year. New moons and full moons and Sabbats and some advice. And I couldn't find that book. So after the first year of our practice together, I wrote it and submitted it to Llewellyn, and they liked it, and they put it out. And then it went out of print eventually. And I thought about doing like a follow-up book. And then I sort of sat around and I thought about it and I went, no, what I need is an updated book because my practice has changed so much in those almost 20 years. And witchcraft, because modern witchcraft is this growing, changing, evolving religion and spiritual practice, which is one of the things I like about it. But it doesn't look the same today as it did in 2005 when I wrote this book. Lots of things have changed, which is great. I have no complaints about that. But one of the reasons that it's subtitled Rituals and Magic for Two or More is one of my best friends has been in a coven of two for many, many years. Mm-hmm. She and another friend started out in a big coven. The coven broke up. They started practicing just on their own, and they have been practicing together for 10, 15, 20 years. I don't know how long, a long time. Is that a coven? Is that not a coven? I guess it is. So, and then, my stepdaughter, who also out in California, far away from me, she has a very loose association of people who you wouldn't technically call them a coven. Nobody's taken any vows to each other. They're not committed, but the same general group of people, periodically somebody goes, hey, let's do a ritual. And whoever's available gets together and they do it. And she usually leads it. But I was like, this is not the coven that I wrote about all these years ago. I need something that's more flexible to reflect the more flexible nature, and which doesn't mean you can't have a traditional coven, high priest, high priestess, all that kind of stuff. If that works for you, that's great, but you don't have to be limited to that. And so that's where this book on covens came from. That and the fact that as I was doing my research, because when you're going to submit a book to a publisher, one of the things that you have to do is give them what they call comp titles, comparable titles that my book is like this book and this book, but better because and all of those coven books that I had gotten back in the day were out of print and there were no new ones. I'm looking, I'm on the Great Zon, and I was like, where are the coven books? Dudes, where are the coven books? And then I was like, okay, I really have to write this book. And hopefully people are finding it helpful. I hope.
I hope so. I mean, one of the major questions I always get is how do I start a coven? How do I start a group or kindred or what have you?
I have hints. I have suggestions.
Yeah,
do not do this. I have some of that. And I have a whole lot of this is what I have learned in, the years since 2004. This is what I learned to do, not to do, the things you need to watch out for, all that stuff I put in this book. I couldn't put it in the first book because I hadn't learned it yet. There was some of it. There were a few things. There were some things I learned from watching other covens, from my own coven, some of the things that I saw there that I was like, ooh, that's not a good idea. From, the covens that we guested at, it's like, yes, probably not a great idea to get super, super stoned before you lead a ritual, just, off the top of my head, unless maybe everybody's going to be super, super stoned, in which case, whatever. Not my approach, let's just say. If that works for you, fine. But, if you follow a Rasta god, maybe that's the way to go. I told you I'd say something stupid.
Hey, that's not stupid.
There's your token stupid thing.
All right, if you say so, but I don't think it's stupid at all. Now, if somebody wants to find an existing coven, I guess with the disappearance of Witchfox, it's gotten a lot harder. So how do you think people should go about finding a coven? And when they do, how do you vet a coven to make sure it's
well? The second question's easier. The first one is tricky. Witch Fox, when that went away, that was a real loss to the community. And in fact, it was really funny because when I sent my original manuscript of Circle Coven and Grove to the folks at Crossed Crow, and the editor went through it and she went, "Oh, these places that you had listed in the back of the book don't exist anymore. Is there anything you want me to put instead?" And I went, "No, there's nothing. There's no replacement." I mean, the couple of places that I suggest to people, if they have them available in their own area, check your local Unitarian church, because the UUs are very witch friendly and sometimes even host witches. I mean, when I was in my original coven and doing my year and a day training to be high priestess, one of the things I did was lead some of the rituals that we put on at the local UU church. So sometimes you can find folks through there. If you happen to have a New Age or pagan store, sometimes they know people, or there's a bulletin board, or you can send up incense smoke signals, whatever. If you don't have those, sometimes, like if there's a health food stores tend to attract the non-traditional, and sometimes you can find people through there. Online, it gets even trickier, because then how can you tell? I mean, I tell people, be very cautious if you're looking at things online. If it's not something that's recommended by somebody listen to your gut. If there is anything that makes you feel at all uncomfortable, or if they ask you for money, run away. If they ask you for money, or if there is anything that seems at all inappropriate to you, then just go away. Better to be a solitary who wants to be in a coven than to be somebody who's stuck in a bad coven. Because I've known people that's happened to, and it can be hard to pry yourself loose. But yeah, it is a real challenge. I live in a rural upstate New York, and now I'm lucky in that the area where I live has a couple of colleges. So we have, some liberal thinking people in amongst the not quite so liberal thinking. And there's a fairly substantial witchcraft community in Binghamton, which is about an hour from me. If you want to travel an hour to go to somebody else's coven, there are some very nice ones there. But in my local area, people would ask me, because I ran an artist cooperative shop and I had my books there. So people would look at the books and they'd look at my name on the front desk and go, "Oh, you're her," and start talking to me about witchcraft. And I would wear my pentacle. I'm firmly out of the broom closet. Once your name's on a book, there's really no hiding.
Yeah, it's over at that point.
And, I'm big on outreach and education and, trying to, enlighten people whenever possible. But people would say to me, "Well, how do I find a coven around here?" And I'd go, "I'm sorry, I don't know. My coven is not open. We are, occasionally let in somebody that one of us, gets to know or who's interested or whatever, but we are not an open coven where anybody can come to visit." That's one of the ways we've survived all these years, I think.
Probably.
We were, semi-open for a while, and we decided it didn't work for us, really. But there are no obvious covens in the area. I know they're out there. They're very quiet. And the woman who taught me, who had been the sort of the lead person in the community, who was out where people could find her, has sort of retired and said, I don't want to be the leader anymore. And nobody has stepped up to take her place. So it is hard. I mean, this is one of the reasons why I write these books, so that if people can't find a coven, they can get, the feel for having witches around them, whether it's in a coven book or they can get an idea for how to start one of their own. I mean, that's what I finally did is, I said, well, I'm not comfortable anymore in the coven that I grew up in. And I had this idea in my head of what I thought I wanted my own coven to look like, which was all these witches that I knew already in the community and that I was comfortable with. And I wanted a bunch of people. And I ended up with 2 women I didn't know except enough to trust them to invite them into my house. But, one worked in my local library and one was an artist at the time at my shop. And, I saw her pentacle and we talked about things. And, I said to both of them, hey, I'm thinking about starting a coven. And they both said, well, I've been a solitary my whole life because I never found a coven that suited me. Yeah, let's try this. And, it was not at all what I'd envisioned. So one of the things that I say in the book is keep an open mind. Yeah. It's all very well and good to think this is the kind of coven I want. Sometimes the gods send you the coven you need. That's exactly what they did with me. This was not me. I get no credit for this. I don't even get credit for the first book. Literally, the idea came to me in the shower, and it was like they went, write this book. It wasn't subtle. Nothing about it. It was subtle. It was like, yeah, okay, you have to do this book. I had no idea it was going to be a career. I thought my heart has always been in writing fiction. I thought, I'll do this one nonfiction book that the gods are telling me I need to do or else. And then I'll just go back to writing fiction. Guess what? Surprise.
Surprise.
It's like 16 or 18 books later. I don't even know how many it is. I've got, like 4 in the pipelines. Well, 3 in the Oracle deck. I just turned in a book this week. Woo!
Yay. I'm so jealous of all you just crank out those books. I've been writing
I do
3 years.
two a year. And I wouldn't call it cranking. It's more like torture. I write much slower than I used to. And I did have to finally give up the day job because I could not any longer do both things. Because I tired, I probably have long COVID. Yay. But I have fibromyalgia. I have all sorts of stuff that slows me down. And I am the slave to 5 cats. So I'm a busy woman.
Sounds like it. Now, you did say in all that discussion about covens, something about how witchcraft has changed since you started with your first coven to today. So what is it that you've seen that's changed over all this time, according to, your own viewpoint?
Well, a lot of things. I think there has been and again, this is very general because the thing about witchcraft is you can have a room full of witches and you can ask them what witchcraft looks like to them. And if you have 50 people in the room, you're going to get 51 answers. Yeah. So, all the generalities, but I think people have veered away from the sort of traditional Wiccan model, Not everybody. Some people are still very happy with that. That was my general. My high priestess was trained in a Wiccan coven. Now, her coven, she didn't have a high priest, and we didn't do levels. So it was like one step towards eclectic away from Wiccan. But what we learned was very much sort of Wiccan flavored. And, if you read my books, they still have a lot of that sort of, some people are like, well, she's really Wiccan. And I'm like, well, yeah, I guess that's how I was taught. And so I'm going to call the quarters the way I was taught in general. And I'm going to say these are the quarter colors I use because that was what I taught. But I also say, you want to use something else? Put it in a different quarter. I don't care. Not my problem. But yeah, I think some of it is there's been a movement to be more eclectic, to be more of I'm going to take this little piece of this and this little piece of that. I actually do not call myself a high priestess anymore. Not because I have anything against it, but because, I've been practicing with in general, the same bunch of people for a long time. And yes, I write the rituals and I lead them most of the time because I'm the one who's comfortable with that. But we're all equals. I'm no high anything. We're all just buddies. I don't feel comfortable personally anymore using that title. Priestess, I'm fine with. I think we're all priests and priestesses. The high thing, I'm like, well, I'm just a little drunk. I'm not high. And not right at this very moment.
It's fine.
Yeah. But so I think some of it is that you've got a whole lot of people who need to be actively included. I mean, I do think the witchcraft community has always been much more inclusive than, say, most other religious paths of any kind, which is why we've attracted so many folks who are other, whatever that other is. Mm-hmm. But, I think because there have been some issues with maybe not being as inclusive as we needed to be, there's more awareness now in general that we need to do better, that we need to try harder to hold space for people who felt like maybe they were not welcome. As far as I'm concerned, everybody is welcome in my witchcraft, yes. Unless you're mean. If you're mean, go somewhere else and do something else. But, if you are a perfectly nice person who doesn't look, sound, or feel like the person next to you, you come to my house, you're fine. Well, I mean, not literally to my house. That would be bad.
Yeah, I tell people all the time. I mean, within heathenry, we have the same thing. We're working on it. As a part of the Troth, obviously, we're an international inclusive heathen organization. We hold that door wide open. It doesn't matter where you come from, who you are, what you look like, your gender, your sexuality, none of that. We welcome you with open arms. But we proudly embrace that paradox of tolerance. We will kick your ass straight out that fucking door if you're a bigot, a racist, sexist, and so on.
Well, that's it. If you're a mean person, don't come in here. Don't go. Right. Just, well, and, if we want to go back to talking about the tarot and our oracle deck, Elizabeth and I made a horrible, horrible error with the tarot deck. I don't know if you picked up on it. We got letters, so many letters. Oh my God. And Llewellyn was just as appalled as we were when this was pointed out to us. And this is our privilege. If you look at that deck, everybody's white. Everybody is white.
Well, to my shame, I didn't pick up on it.
See? Because privilege.
Everybody? Because privilege. You're not wrong.
Yep. And
you're not wrong.
Well, and the thing is, I was focusing on gender inclusivity. I was, I said, let's make some of these pictures be so you can't tell if it's male or female, so everybody feels included. And I was so busy going, oh, let's include everybody. I forgot to include everybody. So when we did the Oracle deck, we fixed it. We owned up. We acknowledged that we had messed up. And I have no problem saying that because you can only make it better by admitting you screwed up and then not screwing up again. And the Oracle deck is the rainbow. And we have people of different sizes. We have all sorts of, we have Raven Digitalis in there. Did you see him?
I wouldn't know it if I did.
Yeah. He's old time Pantheacon friend of mine. And so we made it better. But, that was part of my journey was, because Elizabeth and I both live in fairly white areas of the country. I mean, my town has plenty of people who are not white, but it's just, So we screwed up. We made it better. And now we're going to do animals. So we don't have to worry about that.
Yeah, and it's cool that you acknowledge it, and it's one of those things. I'm surprised I didn't pick up on it, because like other decks that are in my heavy reading rotation are like the Light Seer Tarot, and I love that it is a reflection of the culture that we live in.
Well, and I think
and things like that.
Some of it is because it does have that sort of slightly fairy tale, ethereal feel. You're not as mindful, maybe. We certainly weren't. But yeah, it's, but I do think that's one of the things that, as a broader witchcraft community, whether you're Wiccan or heathen or anything else, I think we are hopefully trying very hard to be more aware. And, one of the things that I did when I wrote this book is, instead of saying he, she, I said there. Tiny little steps. But, I have friends who are they, them, and I didn't want them to feel like this wasn't talking to them. And there is easy enough. I just, sometimes would have to change a sentence so it was more comfortable. But yeah, so those are some of the changes. And also, I think it's just witchcraft reflects the world we're in. That's one of the reasons why it's the fastest growing religion, in North America, is because it gives people today a place to go when they weren't comfortable with the place they came from. And so everybody's bringing their little bits and pieces in and reflecting it back. And I think that's great.
I agree. I think it is a beautiful thing, how things have changed in that direction. I think, I don't know what the catalyst is necessarily, other than just constant oppression, maybe, that more voices are willing to speak out on their behalf. And I mean, I'm always willing to remind folks, I will, and I acknowledge that I will make mistakes. I will
obviously.
I will use the wrong term. Yep. I may occasionally say the wrong thing. I may make a joke that I think is funny, but I am willing to be told that I have made that mistake. I'm willing to listen as to why it was a mistake, and I'm always looking to grow. So, yeah.
Well,
I try to be the best ally I can be,
And that's my take on it too, is I'm not going to be perfect. I am going to occasionally get the pronouns wrong. And, thankfully my friends for whom that is an issue know and love me and know that my intentions are good. And I will catch myself and go, whoops, sorry, and they, they know that I love and support them, for whoever they are. And I do. I don't care. You do you. For me, the only people that I won't accept are the people who are unaccepting of others, who are bigots or mean or cruel or whatever. You kick a puppy, go away. You kick anybody, go away. But yeah, other than that, I really don't care. As far as I'm concerned, everybody is welcome. I don't get the people who don't think that way. I mean, that's the hardest problem for me, is I don't understand why anybody cares what other people do or think or believe, or it's like, so you decide you're not the gender you were born as on the outside or the inside or whatever. Why is that a problem for me? It's not. It doesn't affect me at all. You decide that you want to be in a relationship with 4 other people. Also does not affect me at all. If you were in a relationship with me and wanted to be with 4 other people, that might be an issue. Until that time, I don't care.
Yeah. There's plenty of there's plenty of opportunity to learn more about other people out there, for sure. I would like to remind everyone listening, that we are all gifted in one way or another somehow with this unique thing called consciousness. And, it's been enshrined in different ways and different ideologies. The most important thing is to think that one, we are all connected. Two, we are not all one, not in my view. We are beautiful islands in this vast network and sea of diversity. And it's always wonderful to get to know that other island on their terms, not yours.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
100%.
Yep. So I guess this is a good place to come to a close on the regular conversation. Unless, is there something that you wanted to talk about, or maybe parting thoughts you want to share, something you wanted to throw in there?
Be kind to each other, be kind to yourself. That sometimes is the hardest thing. I mean, I do talk about that a little bit in some of my books. Let yourself walk your own path. Don't let anybody else tell you what that path should be. I am not going to tell you. One of the things that I say over and over and over again in all of my books is, here's what I'm suggesting. If this doesn't work for you, do something else. My way is not necessarily the only way. If something else works for you, if you want to use a blue candle instead of a green candle, if you want to do this ritual on the new moon instead of the full moon, if you want to do it naked in your backyard, go for it. Unless there are mosquitoes, in which case I don't advise it. Or scary neighbors, either way, mosquitoes, scary neighbors. But yeah, just walk your path with as much joy as you can. That's all.
I like that. So thank you, Deborah, again, for all the time that you've given me today and our listeners. Tell them real quick where they can find you.
Well, I am all over the interwebs because my publisher and my agent make me. And also because I like to connect with my readers and with, other pygmy folks and cat people. You can find all the links to everywhere that I am at my website, which is www.deborahblakeauthor.com. I have no imagination whatsoever. It's just my damn name and author. That is Deborah, Deborah, the long biblical way, because born Jewish. I mean, I'm still Jewish because you're always Jewish. Just ask Hitler. But so if you go to my website, you'll find my link to Twitter, where I'm Deborah Blake, and to Facebook, where I'm Deborah Blake, and to Instagram, where I'm Deborah Blake Author, because again, with the no imagination, I'm trying TikTok, but I haven't been able to quite wrap my brain around it. I have a Patreon if anybody's interested in coming to see what I have to say there. Sort of replaced my semi-defunct blog. But yeah, if people have questions for me, I answer every email, I answer every message, because if somebody's going to take the time to write me a note, I'm going to take the time to answer them. The answer might be no, but yeah. So yeah, DeborahBlakeAuthor.com.
Awesome. Thank you again for being here. For everyone listening, the rest of this interview is going to be extended into the morbid and more fun and weird on Patreon. To be part of that, you're going to have to go to patreon.com/weirdwebradio or go to weirdwebradio.com and click join the membership. As always, thank you all for being here. Thank you for listening. Please share this show and any other that you enjoy with your friends and your family. Help spread the news that Weird Web Radio is where you get a lot of insight, help, and entertainment. So, stay weird out there, my friends. And now it is bonus audio time. Deborah Blake, are you ready?
I'm as ready as I'll ever be.
Fair enough. So, first question around this place is always the same. What famous person's resting place do you most want to visit, and why? Do you want to hear how they just answered that question? What famous person's resting place would you most like to visit? That and many others, including what they think about the afterlife, what they may or may not do in cemeteries, what are their traditions, magical practices that have to do with the dead, folklore that surrounds their homes, and so much more, available for only $5. $5 a month. Even if I make more than one episode in a month, it's still just $5 a month at patreon.com patreon.com/weirdwebradio or go to weirdwebradio.com and click join the membership. You can find me on Instagram @weirdwebradio. You can find me on Facebook as Weird Web Radio, or come join the new, fun, and exciting Weird Web Radio Facebook group. Thank you again for being here. Stay weird out there, my friends.